Welcome to today's webinar, Reach for the Clouds with FusionReactor. So the agenda for today, okay, so FusionReactor facts. FusionReactor SaaS or cloud is available on any environment, whether it be on-premise, private or public cloud. So some people sort of thought when we launched cloud that they can only run it on a cloud environment, but that's not the case. So essentially it extends the current on-premise capability that most people have got. It's the same Java agent, so there's nothing different that you need to install to get FusionReactor Cloud to work. It's the same agent. What it does is it adds a new user interface, and with that user interface you've also got some additional capabilities which extend the on-premise UI that you all hopefully know and love. You've still got the on-premise UI, so if you go for cloud, you get essentially a hybrid solution. So you get the on-premise user interface as well as the cloud user interface. One question that comes up a lot is people ask how much data is being transferred up to the cloud if with this solution. And the answer is it's about 11K a minute. So all the data is fully compressed. It's a secure bi-directional channel. So the data is being sent securely, and it's about 11K a minute. FusionReactor Cloud is hosted with Amazon Web Services. So obviously that's SOC 2 and ISO 27001 compliant from a security perspective. So what are some of the additional capabilities and benefits? So the first thing, interesting transactions. So FusionReactor Cloud sort of tries to take the guesswork out of what's going wrong. So it's analyzing transactions which have taken place, and it's picking out the transactions which it believes you will be most interested in. So these are transactions which have got errors, or potentially transactions which are slow or very slow. And we're pushing those transactions up to the cloud each minute. So obviously the benefit there is we're hoping that that will speed up issue resolution, because we're just giving you the information that you need. We've also got a real-time live view. So a lot of people tell us that the thing they love about FusionReactor is its real timeliness, and we didn't want to lose that with the cloud. So we can still offer a real-time view, and here you can see running requests coming in. You can see all the metrics as they're updating. You can also do things like you can run a stat trace. We've got historical metrics, so we're storing up to 90 days of aggregated data with the Ultimate Edition license and 30 days with Enterprise. You can also collaborate with features. So what that means is you can save transactions or profiles or traces, CPU snapshots. You can see JDBC, so SQL transactions. All those can be saved, and anybody who is authorized to have access to your account can also see all that information. So the idea is that through that collaboration, again, you should be able to, if you spot an anomaly, that you'll be able to share that with your teammates and hopefully discover what the issues are a lot faster. It's also got greater configurability, so it's got a styled user interface. We've also got configurable metric views, so I'll show you those in a moment. Much more configurable than the on-premise solution. So yeah, that's pretty exciting stuff. Another key capability and a big benefit is that we can provide a holistic view of your application. So with FusionReactor on-premise, you're essentially just seeing your individual instance. And with the cloud, you're able to combine that, the transactional data for a specific application, and give you a holistic, a combined view in the cloud. So I'll also be able to show you that in a moment. And that also gives you, a much different perspective on your application, and enables you to find certain types of issues. Lastly, we've got a fully featured alerting engine. So the alerting engine enables you to set alerts for all the different metrics which we've got. And you can also set alerts on an application, on an entity, so a specific server instance, or on a group of instances, which is also quite useful. The alerting engine, we've got integration with a number of messaging systems such as Slack, Microsoft Teams, PagerDuty, Twilio, VictorOps. You can also send emails, obviously, and there is also the possibility to hook into a URL with an HTTP webhook. So it's very, very flexible. Okay, so let's jump into the demo. So what we're going to be looking at today is visualizing and observing core metrics. Hopefully I'm going to show you how you can spot and filter for various errors and performance problems. We're going to take a look at thread and CPU information. We're also going to look at metrics from a holistic application view. What I mentioned before, and we should be triggering some alerts, hopefully, and also taking a look at the automated error capture. So that's the event snapshots for those folks who are joining us who have the FusionReactor Ultimate Edition. So the first page we come to, this is our homepage. So I've already logged in here. And what this is showing us is how many servers we've currently got online. So right now we've got 8. We can see whether we've got any alerts firing. So I can see right now that I've got 2 errors. I've got an MPE error on my JSP test application, and I've got this serious divide by 0 error. But we'll take a look at those a little bit later. I can also see that from the applications I've got running, my slowest one is I've got a 2-second response time. That's in my CF application, and I've got a couple of errors again in CF app and my JSP test app. I've got some notifications. These are coming up from my FusionReactor instances. And I can also see that I've got 2 outdated servers because we released 8.7.1 today, so I've not updated my servers yet. So out of the ones that I've got, we've got some on the latest version, but I've actually got 2 outdated servers. Down at the bottom here, I can also set some links. So if I wanted to set a link, if I've got a favorite application or a favorite server that I want to connect to, then I can just add a link down here. Okay, so let's take a look at the server view. So I'm just going to click here on the 8. That brings up all the servers that I've currently looking at, and if I go and take a look at the last hour here, you can see all the data refreshes, and for each of these servers I can basically get an idea of what my average response time was, what my throughput is, what my error counts are, and I can see that for all the different servers that I'm monitoring. I can also see all of these servers are currently online, but if I change the status, I can also see offline servers or servers which are alerting. Dig into a server, and I'm going to take my production server here, my Tomcat 9, and I'm actually getting an information message up here because it's detected that I'm not running the latest version of FusionReactor, but I can get rid of that one. I know that now, so I'll just remove that that information or that warning. So basically, I can see here I'm looking at the last hour, but if I open the time picker, I can basically go back, look at the last 30 minutes or the last 3 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to toggle live mode. So this is one of the capabilities that I mentioned before. So people really love the real timeliness of FusionReactor. So if I toggle the live mode, we can see all the metrics are actually updating here. So that's very useful. And if I switch that off now, and then I'm going to go back, I'm going to take a custom time frame, and I'm going to go back to this morning, around about 8 o'clock through to, let's take about 11 this morning, and apply that just to take a look. So this has gone back to the start of the day for me. And what I can see here is that I'd got, when I started my machine, I've got very, very high CPU. I can see I've got my request time really went up. And what you can do with the cloud is you can basically, if you saw that, I can zoom in here on a specific area to get more details about that area and look at it in more detail. And one of the things that I mentioned, the configurability of what we've got, is the ability to add other graphs into the mix, add other metrics. So if I was looking for a specific problem here, I might say, okay, did we have any errors that were going off? So I've selected my client errors. I'd like to see whether I got any server errors. And also maybe what I'd like to see is my thread activity, for example. So to see how many threads have been generated, and you can see how quickly it is to add new graphs into this particular view, so you can get a really in-depth view of what's going on at any point of time. So what we can also do is we can create our own graphs. So if I backspace on that, I've got some graphs down here. So these are all the system graphs that you can see here. So these are all the metrics that we've got. And then down at the bottom, you can see I've got some custom graphs that I've created. And you do that through the metrics tab up at the top. And also here on the right-hand side where it says create custom graph, you can also directly create custom graphs here. It's also possible to set up a profile. And again, we can create custom profiles. And right now we've got 3 profiles which we've got as part of the system. So these are delivered automatically with FusionReactor Cloud. So our server state with errors is one that is sort of pretty similar to this. Really, this gives us HTTP errors which have been generated within that time frame. I can see thread activity, thread state, and request activity, which is also useful, and memory and CPU. And the other one we've got, the web server, is the one that you'll know from FusionReactor on-premise. And the other one we've got is Java memory. So this basically shows me all the various different memory spaces that I've got, and what's rendered here is dependent on which version of Java that you're using, or Cold Fusion if you're running Cold Fusion. Right, so let's take a look into transactions. And if I go into transactions, you can see by default, it's gone into live mode here. And this is showing me recent transactions on this particular server. So you can see the transactions changing. And if I switch here to JDBC requests, for example, then we will instantly start to see JDBC requests which are currently executing on this particular server. So if I go back to web requests now, another capability that we've got here is I can filter these. So right now I'm looking at recent, and this is basically like the request history view that we've got right now in FusionReactor on-premise. So this is essentially exactly the same information. In this particular case, I can also look at running requests, but I can look at slow or requests which were exhibiting errors. So if I just take a look at slow, so this is showing me, again, it's gone back actually to the custom time frame that I had earlier, but I can also say, okay, show me, I don't know, show me in the last 12 hours, all the slowest requests. I can also filter these. So if I said, okay, I just want to see requests which were longer than 1 second, or if I want to see requests which were longer than 10 seconds, then those would be instantly filtered. So what I'm looking at now is show me all the requests which ran longer than 10 seconds within the last 12 hours. So I can see I've got a couple of potential issues here. I've got this write file slow and this generate JSP. And I'm going to take a look at my write file slow first of all. So here, what this particular example is doing is basically this is iterating. I've got an iteration which is running 10,000 times, and within that iteration, I'm opening a file, I'm writing to that file, and I'm closing it inside the iterator. And I can see this ran for 36.53 seconds. We determined it was very slow. But if I click on the profile, so for people who are not familiar with FusionReactor Ultimate, this is an automated profile that we've generated. So this is all configurable. You can tell FusionReactor to generate a profile. By default, it will profile anything that runs longer than 3 seconds, but it's all configurable. And in this particular case, what you can see here is, and you see this very nicely, that 50%, so 50.42% of my time was spent in this close method. 46.42% was spent in the open, and I've got 3.16% of my time was actually spent in the write. So as a developer, if I looked at this profile, it would be very obvious to me that I've messed up here, and that I'd done something wrong. And like I said, the reason for this is that I put the open and the close and the write all inside the iterator. Another capability that we've got that should be familiar for Ultimate customers, but maybe not for everybody else, is that you can see the classes and methods here are all clickable. So when I click that, what actually happens is FusionReactor will instantly decompile that method. And you can see that went very, very quickly here. So I took that file output stream method, clicked on it, and it instantly compiled. The benefit of this is from a user perspective, you can very, very quickly get inside the code. So if you're investigating something, you were doing some root cause analysis, or you were taking a look at transaction which was causing a performance issue, then you can very, very quickly get into that. If I just close that one and go back into my generate.jsp, so I can see here, this was actually doing some database work. I see that from the little icon that we've got here. And if I drill into that and click on the JDBC tab, then I can see all the transactions which were being performed. And as you'll notice, these have all been obfuscated. So when you fire FusionReactor Cloud up, by default, all the JDBC, all the query parameters are obfuscated by default. You can switch that off. So if you don't mind pushing the values up to the cloud, then we can do that, but they are obfuscated by default. And what's also interesting and is different or represented differently in the cloud is the trace views. So I can see here, this was, I've got a number of sub-transactions. I've got a various transaction hierarchy here, and using the wheeler on the mouse, I can zoom in and zoom out of this particular transaction, and you can see here everything's broken down into sort of sub-transactions. And if I click on, in this particular case, on the generate tables sub-transaction, I can actually see down here all the commands which were executed. And similarly, if I go on to the generate contacts, and when I click on one of those, I can see in this particular case the name of the contact. And when I drill in even more, I can actually see this JDBC request. So we've captured that. This one took 3 milliseconds, but this makes it really easy to take a transaction and drill into that so that you can see more details. So we think that's quite a neat feature. I can also, if I wanted to save that, so let's say I wanted to look at that with some colleagues, all I need to do is just click on the save icon up at the top, and it tells me down at the bottom that that transaction was saved. And to view those ones, I can see them under the saved view. So this is the one that I just saved here, this generate.jsp. So let's move on. Profiles we've talked about. These are the 3 profiles that we've currently got stored at the moment on this server. Let's take a look into threads. So threads, you may be familiar with this from FusionReactor on-premise. So all this capability has been ported over to the cloud. So I can select runnable, or I can see whether I've got any blocked threads here. I can also filter these, so I'm just filtering on native IO here. I can also filter them on any particular state. So if I wanted to say, okay, show me all the native IO runnable threads, then I can do that from here. CPU sampler, again, this is a capability from FusionReactor on premise, and I can do all the same thing. I can filter any of the different states. I can also take a snapshot if I wanted to get an idea of what's actually going on from a thread perspective. And the thread visualizer, again, you'll recognize this from FusionReactor on premise if you've got the Ultimate Edition. And again, you can see this is updating in real time. It's very, very usable on the cloud. So, you know, from a performance perspective, it's really very good. Okay, what we can also see here, if I jump into the stack trace, so I just told from here what actually happened in the background is I executed an instance command, and we can see on the right hand side we've got 3 instance commands available. I can do a perform a GC, take a stack trace, or take a new snapshot. And in this particular case, I've taken a stack trace, but you can see that also it was very, very quick. It brought back a lot of information here, so the rendering was very, very fast. I can also filter this, so if I wanted to just look at the runnable threads, I can do that. And of course, I can also filter using the search feature here. So very, very useful. And again, from here, I can also decompile. So if I click on one of those methods, I'm instantly going to jump into the code so that I can troubleshoot that. Okay, finally here, let's take a look at the trace view. So the trace view basically gives us a deep dive perspective and enables us to look at transactions as they're executing. We can combine these transactions with our so-called interesting transactions. If I filter these by slow or errored, then those ones would be what we term interesting. Again, I can filter these. So if I said, I'm going to switch off live mode now, and if I take a look at my errors, and I'm going back, I'm looking at the last 12 hours, that was the last time frame that I'd got selected. But if I said, okay, I just want to take a look at the last hour here, and I'd actually like to see erroneous transactions which ran for longer than 200 milliseconds. And it provides all those ones. We've got little markers on these to show whether they were errors or long-running requests. And if I select one of these, then I'll instantly see the trace view on the right-hand side, and I can see what the transaction hierarchy was. I can actually see what the error was here. So this is showing me the stack trace down here. And we've also got the event snapshot. I'll talk about that a little later. But the event snapshot, what this is doing is highlighting exactly where inside the code this particular error occurred. And it's showing me down below here, I've got all the stack frames and all the scope variables right across the stack. But we'll take a look at that a little later on when we're doing some, when we're looking at the alerts. So that is the trace view. So the next thing that I'd like to show you is the applications view. So FusionReactor is not just looking at individual transactions or web requests. We're actually able to look at at the whole application. And I've got a number of applications running here. One of these is CF application. So I've just got a few CFM pages that I'm actually running here, but you can see which pages have been executed and the time taken. And down below here, so what you're actually seeing at this point, these are all so-called interesting transactions. So I'm only showing, or we're only showing transactions here which are either they threw an error or they were particularly slow. And I can see in this particular example here, I've got this random exception.cfm. And if I drill into that and I jump into the event snapshot, again, just like we saw before, the event snapshot is actually able to, in this particular case, we're not rendering the Java as we were before because that was a JSP example. In this particular case, it's actually rendering the Cold Fusion code. So I can see this is stringsplit.cfc. And it's done that because I've configured FusionReactor and told it where my source code repository is. So in this particular case, it's actually gone and retrieved my code based on where this particular error was, and it's rendering it. And again, down below, I can see all the scope variables. So I've got the full context here of this particular error. So let's just go back into applications, and I'm going to take a look at my Spring application, and you can see this. So Spring is, and I've got a couple of examples here. I've got a Spring and a Struts, a little demo application running in the background. But for this particular application, Spring is a framework. Just as if you were using Cold Fusion framework, like ColdBox or Framework 1, and FusionReactor will automatically identify the transactions within that framework. So what you're seeing here is a breakdown of time taken. So this is for each transaction for this particular point in time. How much time did we take? And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take a custom time frame, and I'm going to go back to this morning and take a look at between 8 and 11. And because this is when my server started this morning. And again, down at the bottom, I'm seeing the interesting transactions here which occurred, and I can click through, see average time, I can see slowest, so which was my slowest transactions here. I can see throughput. And what's interesting here with the throughput is what you can see is around about 8:33, I started a second server. So I started my local server. So this particular application is already running on another application server that we've got. But then I started my own server, which is running the same application. So what happened at this point is, and if I zoom into that, what happened exactly here is a second server came online, and we can see the throughput, the number of transactions going up, because I was also running the same demonstration application on that particular server. So that's showing the effect of this aggregated, this holistic view. And what's also interesting, if I take one of these transactions, and then if I take a look at the average time, you can see this was the point when I introduced a second server. And as soon as I did that, I started getting different response times for this particular transaction executing. So that's also interesting. The light green line is basically the average, but I can see in this particular case that I was getting some fluctuations, and if I look at that, let's say across the last 12 hours, then I can see across that particular time as well, there was also a number of fluctuations, and some of these transactions have been identified by FusionReactor as being interesting. So all of these ones were actually slow transactions that took place. So the throughput of this, we'd had, I think it was probably several thousand add to cart transactions. But by doing this, what it enables us to do is to drill into one of these transactions and look for a potential problem. And again, we've got access to the JDBC information. So this is a Hibernate call here, and I've got all the general information, which we've also got in the on-premise version of FusionReactor. Okay, so what I'm going to look at now is the alerting, and you can see there's a number of alerts that I've got set up here. But before I do that, I'm going to generate some alerts. So I've got a little JSP page here, which I'm going to fire some alerts. This takes a parameter string in this particular JSP page, and if I don't pass the string in, if I do pass the string in, let me show you what that looks like. So if I do pass the string as an argument, then all it does is it just prints the string out and performs a string length. But if I don't pass that string in, then if I remove the argument, then it will throw a null pointer exception. So going back into the cloud now, and if I take a look at some of my checks, and I'll just show you one here. So if I do, I've got a high memory. So I'll just take a look at this one and edit it to show you what the capability is. So you can see we can either create threshold or status checks. For this particular threshold check, I can specify whether it's relevant to an instance, a group, or an application. In this particular case, I've associated with this with an instance. I can have this associated with any instance if I hit that checkbox. But in this particular case, I've selected my production server. I then select the metric which I'd like to put this condition on, and if I open up that drop down, we've got all the various different metrics here. But in this particular case, I'm looking at allocated memory, and then if I set the threshold, so let's say we want to set that at I don't know, 86%. I can also set a warning threshold, and if I scroll down here, what FusionReactor is showing me is exactly what the values currently are for that particular metric. So I can see that my server is running around about 16, 17, 18, 19% right now. So I'm quite a ways off that threshold. But this gives you an idea of how you can gauge what the conditions should be. So below that, I can say when I'd like to trigger an alert, whether I want a single point, all of the points account, or an average. And I can set the threshold. I can also set a cooldown period. So if I set a cooldown period, so after an alert has been fired, I can say how long I'd like to wait before checking this particular check once again. So it's so that you basically don't get inundated with alerts. And the subscriptions, this is how we alert you that something's gone wrong. So you can see in this particular case, I've said I want to alert on a Slack channel, but I can also, I've got email the CEO, so I'll get that one, or I can send a demo email, or we've got a number of various different Slack rooms here. But as I said, we've also got native integration with a bunch of other messaging systems. So that's how to set up an alert. And if I go back to the main screen, I can see here, I've got one error currently, and this is my, I've got a divide by 0 error. And if I click on that and then click on the alerts, I can see how this alert has been fired. And if I click on view, then what FusionReactor will show me is what actually triggered that particular alert. So I can see, I've said the alert should trigger at if I hit a state where I've got five of these error events, and that happened here. And I can see down below basically as the events were firing, whether that would generate a warning or an error. So yeah, that's the alert details. But I did want to show you finally the null pointer exception. So again, for people who are familiar with FusionReactor on premise, so we can see we've got a null pointer exception here. This is the one that I just ran, which we fired. And if I take a look at that, again, in the event snapshots, in this particular case, for this particular file, this is not called Fusion, this is a JSP. But I configured FusionReactor, told it where my source code was, and it's gone out and it's showing here that I threw this error as I was basically doing a print line in this particular case. And as I said before, the argument here is null, so I can see at this particular point, this is actually what caused the error. That argument is null down at the bottom here. Okay, so that's the demonstration. So let's jump back into the last slides. So the last two we've got licensing and pricing. So FusionReactor is license based on reservations, which is how we do it with the on-premise version. But we've also got on-demand licensing similar to AWS. And one license allows you to have up to 4 instances on a unique host or 4 Docker containers. So this can be, it can make FusionReactor a very cost-effective solution if you move to a containerized environment using Dockers. Then essentially you can have 4 containers for each license seat. And the on-demand billing is suited also to a containerized environment. So if you're continually bringing servers up and down, then it would be much more suitable to go to the cloud license, because then you'd be able to benefit from the on-demand licensing. And FusionReactor Cloud comes in 2 editions. We've got the Enterprise Edition, which is $59 per month per seat, or 9 cents per hour for on demand. And we've got the Ultimate, which is $79 per seat, or 13 cents for the on-demand licensing. And the 59 and the 79, those are based on an annual reservation. And it's slightly different than the on-premise version right now. With the annual on-premise version, license for FusionReactor, we bill for the full year in advance, but with the cloud, it's billed monthly. So you would reserve for a year, but bill monthly. And if you didn't take the annual reservation, then it automatically goes onto the on-demand billing. And by taking the annual reservation, you basically save 20% on the price. So last slide here, how would you migrate? So migrating to FusionReactor Cloud, it's really easy. Basically, you just sign up. So that's the link there. When you sign up, you would create an account. So you give it an account name, you put your name in, your email, select a password, or you can also sign up with Google. So we support Google single sign-on, and that's it. You've got your cloud account then. As soon as you register, we will send you a new key, and the key has got the word cloud in front of it, and then it's a similar 25-digit key, just like the regular FusionReactor on-premise key. You'd then replace your current on-premise key with your cloud key. So you can go into the FusionReactor user interface and just replace the key, or if you're deploying with a script, you'll just replace your current key with your new cloud key, and that's it. So it's very simple to migrate. As soon as you've done that, FusionReactor the agent will instantly start sending data up to the cloud, and you're done, basically. And then you can start enjoying the benefits, and it's all for the same price.